Hey there! Ready to demystify a powerful, deep learning technique? We're diving deep into neural networks, specifically tackling overfitting.
Yeah, overfitting, that's a big one. It's like when a student aces a test by just memorizing, but freezes when they hit a new problem.
Right, they haven't really learned the underlying concepts.
Exactly. And in neural networks, that can be a huge problem.
So what's the solution? What are we diving into today to tackle this?
Well, our main source today is this groundbreaking paper. It's called Dropout, a simple way to prevent neural networks from overfitting.
Catchy title, and where was this published?
This was in the Journal of Machine Learning Research. Pretty prestigious.
Okay, so we're dealing with credible stuff here.
Definitely. And the authors, we're talking big names, like Jeffrey Hinton.
Okay, so this isn't just some random blog post. We're dealing with the heavy hitters. But this paper, it talks about Dropout. What is that exactly?
So this paper, it really changed the game. It basically introduced this really simple but crazy effective solution to overfitting in these neural networks.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but also a little confused, because when I think deep learning, I think finding patterns. So how does something called Dropout even fit in?
That's the beauty of it. It's all about introducing randomness during the training process.
Randomness, that seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it?
I know, right? But stick with me. Think of it like this. Imagine you're coaching a basketball team.
Okay, I'm following.
Now, if your players always practice with the same teammates, they might become, a bit too reliant on each other's, quirks on the court.
They'd only know how to play within that specific group.
Exactly. They kind of get tunnel vision. But now, imagine you randomly bench a few players at each practice.
Shake things up a bit.
Yeah. Forces the remaining players to adapt, right?
Yeah.
They become more versatile, less dependent on any one teammate.
So they become all-rounders, more adaptable. I can see where you're going with this, but how does this translate to neural networks?
So think of each neuron in a network like a player on our team. During training, Dropout randomly turns off a percentage of these neurons, like benching them for that round.
So these neurons are temporarily out of the game.
We got it. And this is where the magic happens. See, by preventing any small group of neurons from becoming overly specialized to that training data, it forces the network to learn these redundant representations.
So instead of everyone just memorizing one specific thing, they're forced to learn a more robust and general understanding.
Yeah. And it prevents something called co-adaptation. Imagine like a neural network learning to, say, recognize cats in images. Without Dropout, some neurons might get fixated on just pointy ears.
And others might only focus on, I don't know, whisker patterns.
Exactly. But with Dropout, because those neurons are randomly deactivated during training, the network can't become overly reliant on just those specific features.
So it's like having a backup plan. Even if some neurons are benched, the network can still recognize the cat.
Exactly. It makes the network way more robust and resilient to variations in the data, which is crucial in the real world.
This is fascinating. So we're basically building more resilient neural networks by introducing a bit of controlled chaos.
Yeah, you could say that. But this concept of building resilience through diversity, it actually has some pretty interesting connections to evolutionary biology, specifically sexual reproduction.
Hold on, neural networks and sex. I need to hear more about this. This is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so you're saying there's a link between sexual reproduction and making neural networks better. I'm not sure I see it.
Well, it's all about promoting diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is good for evolution, and it turns out for deep learning.
Yeah.
See, sexual reproduction, with all that gene shuffling, it might seem kind of messy compared to just, cloning yourself.
Yeah, why fix what's not broken, right?
Yeah.
At least that's what I tell myself.
Exactly. But environments change, right? Like, what if a new disease pops up or the climate goes haywire? If you're too specialized, too reliant on one set of traits, you might not survive.
All your eggs in one basket?
Right. But organisms that reproduce sexually, they benefit from all that gene mixing. More diversity, which means they're more adaptable, more likely to have the right stuff to survive, even when things change.
So are you saying Dropout is like introducing this genetic diversity into the neural network? Making it more adaptable, like with those sexually reproducing species?
Now you're getting it. It prevents that over-reliance on specific neurons or pathways. The network can't depend on any single neuron always being there, so it learns to generalize better, more resilient,
So it's not just about being right, it's about being robust, being able to handle whatever gets thrown at it. And speaking of resilience, the paper also mentioned successful conspiracies. Didn't expect that one.
Yeah, it's another interesting parallel. See, a big interconnected conspiracy, super vulnerable, one person cracks, and the whole thing can unravel.
Too many links in the chain, too many weak points.
Exactly. But smaller, independent cells, where nobody knows the whole plan, much harder to break.
So Dropout creates these more resilient, independent cells of neurons, each doing their own thing without being too reliant on the others.
You got it. And the best part, this actually translates to some really impressive results, like in image recognition, for example.
Which is huge, right? I mean, that's everything from self-driving cars to, like, our social media feeds these days.
Exactly. So they tested it on these benchmark data sets, like MNIST, the one with handwritten digits,
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
and CFAR-10, that's images of everyday stuff, like cars and birds. Dropout significantly improved accuracy in both cases.
So we're not talking about a small improvement here. This is significant.
Oh, yeah. And it even boosted performance on ImageNet.
That's the massive one, right? With like millions of images.
That's the one. So we're talking about pushing the boundaries of what's possible with image recognition. And it goes beyond just accuracy, too.
Ooh, there's more.
The researchers found that Dropout also leads to better feature visualization.
Okay, break that down for me. Feature visualization.
So it means the neurons, they learn to recognize the essential features of, say, an object, rather than getting distracted by unimportant details. Imagine you're training a network to recognize bicycles, right?
Okay, I'm visualizing a bicycle.
Without Dropout, it might get fixated on the color of the bike in one image, even if color doesn't really matter for identifying a bike.
Right, it's about the shape, the wheels, those key features.
Exactly. Dropout forces the network to focus on those defining characteristics, those more meaningful features.
So it's like Dropout helps the network develop a deeper, more nuanced understanding of what it's looking at. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's not all. It also promotes something called sparsity.
Sparsity. Does that have something to do with making the network more efficient?
Ding, ding, ding.
Ah,
We have a winner. Remember how Dropout randomly turns off neurons during training? Well, this leads to a network where only a subset of neurons are active for any given input.
so instead of all neurons firing all the time, it's more selective.
Precisely. And that's huge. First, it can speed up training times, which is crucial when you're dealing with massive data sets.
Yeah.
And second, it reduces memory requirements, which means you can train larger, more complex networks on less powerful hardware.
So it's not just about accuracy, it's also about efficiency.
You got it. It's a win-win. But, it's always good to see how a new technique stacks up against the competition, right? So the researchers compared Dropout to some other approaches.
So who did Dropout go up against? What they compare it to?
Well, they looked at some of the traditional methods like L2 weight decay.
L2 weight decay, refresh my memory. What was that one again?
It's like adding a penalty to complexity, So a really intricate, detailed model gets kind of pushed towards being simpler, less likely to overfit.
Right, like pruning a tree that's gotten too wild. So how'd Dropout do?
It beat them. Consistently outperformed those traditional methods. And not just by a little bit. This was a pretty clear sign that Dropout was something different, something better.
Okay, impressive. But did they compare it to anything, more sophisticated?
They did. They actually went up against Bayesian neural networks.
Ah, the big leagues. Those are supposed to be like the gold standard for handling uncertainty.
Right. Exactly. Really powerful, but man, they can be computationally expensive, especially with those giant data sets.
So not exactly something you just whip out on a whim.
You got it. But here's the thing. Dropout, even though it's not based on that same super complex theory, it actually performs surprisingly close to the Bayesian methods.
So it's like a shortcut, getting you most of the benefit without the massive computational headache.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why it's become so popular in the field. Simple, effective, efficient, just a really elegant solution.
A true game changer. So for our listeners out there, maybe wrestling with their own neural networks, what are the big takeaways from all this Dropout business?
I'd say if you're working with deep neural networks, especially in areas where overfitting is a problem,
Yeah.
which, let's face it, is a lot of them,
Pretty much a given.
Dropout should be on your short list. It can really make a difference in your model's accuracy, how well it generalizes, and even how efficient it is.
It's like that secret ingredient that just makes everything better.
I like that. And the cool thing is, this paper, as groundbreaking as it was, it didn't really close the book. If anything, it opened up a whole new set of questions.